Okay, Gurudev, are you there? Or could you unmute?
Can you hear me? Hello?
And make sure you have English and original audio.
English.
Mute original audio.
Okay.
Okay. So is there anything that you'd like to share with us?
Well, it's a nice environment here at Gaudiya. As I mentioned, spring is coming on. I think I mentioned last week. Now it's official because Gopati, our peacock, is dancing, showing his feathers. And we can hear the bull deer, the male deer's mating call, quite loud in the forest around us. So we are reminded of Madhava, the spring, and the romantic life of Bhagwan through the natural environment here. It's very, very, very nice. And what else? We're going to just got a couple more chapters in the middle section, the radius of the circle of friends, as I think of it, and the center. That section is about the Prakat Lila, and the center, which is the last section, is about the Aprakat Lila. So I just started to read that over since I wrote it some time ago. It's quite good. It's quite nice. So I've been reviewing that, and that's what comes to mind at the moment. So why don't we go ahead and take the questions?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just still setting up the Q&A, and my computer is getting a little overloaded. Okay. Vijay, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. And my Dandavats. That's what the cooing was this morning around the house. We had some birds, some doves. So thank you for that invitation. I mean, I don't know how do you say it when you, but for the information about the spring being here. My question is from the Science of Self-Realization. And I was reading the Science of Self-Realization and got to the part chapter 5, practicing yoga in the age of quarrel. I was in the super consciousness, and it states that Aura is the supreme controller and situated in everyone's heart, but also in every atom. And then the next paragraph, it says he is known as the Paramatma, and the Paramatma, the super soul, Lord, and by which the Lord is present everywhere. And that, like, I don't know, set me back going, wow, I thought the Paramatma resided in the souls of the individuals, but here the Paramatma is everywhere, even in the rocks and the trees. And
so you wanted me to comment on that?
What's that?
So you wanted me to comment on that?
Yeah, because okay. As I figured Ishvar.
I understand. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
The term Paramatma is probably best understood by studying the Paramatma Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami. Sat Sandarbha, Sat means six. It's a 6 treatise, beginning with Bhagavad, which is about the personality of the Godhead himself, Bhagwan, and then the Paramatma Sandarbha about the Paramatma feature of the Godhead. And then, of course, you have the Krishna Sandarbha, which is about Krishna, the Bhakti Sandarbha about Bhakti, the Priti Sandarbha about Prem, about love, Priti, love of Krishna. And of course, all that is prefaced by the Tattva Sandarbha. So those are the 6, but the Paramatma Sandarbha is probably the best place to go to get a comprehensive understanding of this feature of the Absolute. And as per the Sandarbha, for Jiva Goswami, Paramatma is an overarching term that refers to the idea that Vishnu, as the source of the world, of our experience, sensual, mental, intellectual experience, is, as the name implies, all pervasive. So he is the source of the world. He enters into, let's say, the source of the worlds. Okay, we have a multiverse kind of a conception. That said, of course, what the Bhagavatam refers to as a universe and what modern science refers to as a universe, you'd have to see if they're talking about the same thing. But at any rate, many worlds, whether they're galaxies or universes, it seems to refer to a multiverse conception. So the multiverse, the many worlds come from him. He enters into them, and he enters into every aspect of them, which would imply that, as the name Vishnu does, he is all pervasive. So the atheists sometimes say that where is God? They haven't seen him, and the theist replies, where is he not? I see him everywhere, in everything. So the Gita says that, for example, Jagadavyakta Murtina. So the world is in me, I'm in the world. You can't get away from him. That's the basic idea. So therefore, the Paramatma refers to the Purushas, Purusha avatars, the first descent from the spiritual world into the material world, and the manifesting of the material world, for that matter, is in the form of the Mahavishnu. Then he expands as the multiverse and enters into each one as sometimes referred to as Garbhodakshay Vishnu. And then he enters into every heart, into every atom, into everything as Kshirodakshay Vishnu. So Mahavishnu, Karna Dakshay Vishnu, the causal kind of beginning, and then the Garbhodakshay Vishnu and the Kshirodakshay Vishnu. I mean, they're given different names to help us understand them in different places, but these are all features of the Paramatma, or manifestations of the Paramatma feature of the Godhead, who presides over the world. So, yes, it's to explain that, sometimes it's said he is in every atom, in everything. It doesn't mean that everything is a jiva. That's another thing. I mean, the stone may not be a jiva. Some may be jewels and so forth, maybe yogis in a state of prakriti nirvana. That's another subject. But if we say the animate and inanimate features, another way of talking about it, he's present in both. And it means he's behind everything. So the whole material nature is not independent in its genesis and in its function and in its destruction. The destruction and the genesis would be an outgoing and an incoming, sometimes poetically depicted as the breath of Vishnu. It's interesting to note, I think Gurnishta was mentioning it to me the other day, that in recent times, in modern scientific writing, this idea of an expanding and contracting universe is becoming more prominent. And the state of contraction, I forget the phrase that was used to describe it. Ganesh, if you could chime in, you could help me, but it was very analogous in our terms to susupti, which means the world enfolds back into Vishnu, and the jivas with them, and their karma is suspended, so they're in a state of deep sleep, which is kind of the in-between of the manifesting and the unmanifesting. It's interesting.
I think that,
to note that yes, Ganesh.
I think the term they use is the quantum
I
cloud.
can't hear you if you're speaking.
Oh,
The English and mute original audio.
okay. Yeah, that's right.
What is it
Quantum
called?
cloud. Quantum cloud. It's this state where like time and space ceases to exist, and like it's in between, according to quantum gravity, between the expansion and contraction of the universe. It goes into this quantum cloud space, which is basically exactly like susupti.
Yeah. So according to quantum gravitational perspective, which is more and more the cutting edge perspective, the worlds come and go, and they enter into the cloud where time and space is suspended. So it's very analogous to susupti. So it's interesting to note that the Vedic rishis' notion of the world, I think, more than any other explanation of the natural world, has correspondence with what's being found and described in different words by modern science. And they're going about it, of course, in a different way, about understanding the world in a different manner. So their method or their the language with which they explain it is understandably different, but there's considerable correspondence. So anyway, a little bit off track there, but the Paramatma is, again, all three of those forms of Vishnu are considered Paramatma. And the idea is that he's behind, within, and without everything. So yes, what Prabhupada's writing is accurate. Thank you for the question, Paramatma GP Jai.
Jai, thank you so much.
Okay.
Lord Nishringa Ki Jai.
Okay, Jai.
Taras, do you have a question? That was my attempt to pronounce his name correctly. I don't know if it was right.
Oh, good. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Of course he has a question.
Some time ago, I have heard, or maybe I have read, I don't remember now, how Bhaktivinoda Thakura is speaking about different religions, and I remember his statement that when he comes like to a different like churches or like different holy places, and he sees different ways how God is being worshipped, so he just thinks that also that's how they are worshiping Krishna here, like in different way. And also it was mentioned that in different traditions there should be like a different equivalence to what is in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Like, for example, if we if there are like the topmost thing is love for Krishna in Vrindavan, so maybe in different traditions there are like something different, but which gives the same emotional state to the like worshipper. And so my question from that would be like, if there is, if there could be a nam without a proper like without a proper meaning behind it, the right feeling behind it. Like you can pronounce Krishna's name, but without, the correct understanding. So, and that understanding you can get by chanting, like by cleaning yourself, and the getting that understanding. But is it possible to have a right understanding without practice of Nam, without chanting? Like to have the same equivalent feeling towards God, or your understanding what God is, as we can get, without the same practice as we do.
Uh-huh. Yes, Bhakti Vinod was very much, in some respects, a theistic perennialist, and so he taught that there is an underlying current of philosophical insight about the nature of being in the world. It shows up in different cultures at different times, and it's all speaking about the same thing. At the same time, that thing, that absolute, is variegated, so the descriptions may be different at different times and different different cultures, and pertain to different aspects of the absolute. Who, for example, as the Bhagavatam says, has unlimited avatars, asankhya, descents, appearances in the world. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote in his Gita, one of his Gita commentaries, regarding the verse in the 4th chapter that speaks about the avatar tattva, the beginning of the 4th chapter. Samavami Yuge Yuge, he manifests again and again, yuga after yuga, and he said that doesn't mean only in India. In other cultures, he may also appear as a Shaktivesh, he says, and be worshipped there accordingly. So I think that in answer to your question, that the Gaudiya Vaishnavism is a particular dispensation from the absolute that's very extraordinary. It speaks about a realm, for example, in transcendence, that the inhabitants of Vaikuntha don't know about. Just to underscore how extraordinary is that dispensation, about the private life, if you will, of Bhagavan, where he takes off his crown and becomes intimate with his associates, and he is more than God, so to speak. That idea is a extraordinary, as I say, dispensation or revelation that is initiated by Krishna himself. Vishnu couldn't do it. Vishnu Narayan couldn't do it from Vaikuntha. So he's done it himself in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and out of an internal reason, for that matter. Of course, we also understand that prior to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, or independent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, Krishna also manifests in the world to make his Leela known. But it's more fully known, and that idea distributed by himself in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But in the other case, it's Krishna that makes this dispensation known. And the more broad conceptions of the absolute, of the Godhead, they're more readily available for people to tap into. They have been disseminated by different powerful people, Shaktivesh avatars, like a Jesus, for example, as we would look at him, and other great persons, and so forth. But to come to Rag Bhakti if this is kind of your question, enter into the Braja Leela of Krishna, you will need to be connected with that dispensation. Even chanting the name of Krishna may not be sufficient. Therefore, Raghunath Das Goswami praises his guru, and in the context of doing so, he says, Nam Shreshtam. He says, among the other many things that you've given me, Nam Shreshtam Api Sachiputram, the highest conception of the name, the Nam, as disseminated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you have given me. So you can find people chanting Krishna Nam without the conceptual orientation, Sambandha Gyan, given in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, you will attain a different result. The result will be transcendental and extraordinary, but for example, they may be delivered from material existence and attain mukti, and see Krishna to be a face of Narayan that he sometimes shows. But not that there's a realm that corresponds with that face and that it's the Mahavaikunta and so on and so forth. So to get that conception, you need to be connected with Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhaktivinoda Thakur himself has experienced and then wrote about it, that even within the context of being born in Bengal and having some acquaintance with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and on that, in his teaching, and on that basis chanting, if the Sambandha Gyan or the corresponding knowledge and conceptual orientation for Nam Shreshtam, the highest conception of the name, is not in place, then people won't make progress. And he witnessed it. He saw that they were getting Nam and some general idea, but they weren't getting the teachings from their gurus, sufficient siksha. So that's why there's such an emphasis on the part of Bhaktivinoda Thakur for siksha, writing so many books. His books were bridge books, if you will, to the Goswami's books and so forth, to more widely, as Prabhupada could be seen as well in his time in the Western worlds, to bring people into a refined conception of tattva behind the name, so that they will attain a corresponding bhava. So all good in different cultures, different ideas about the Godhead are there, but to go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dispensation is very specific. And we try to let everybody come in touch with that. Obviously, we disseminate that. But no, I don't think that you can. I have seen and read some thinkers in different cultures come up with ideas that correspond with the thinking of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In my book, Aesthetic Vedanta, I quoted one Russian scholar, I forget his name, who gave had a very nice idea that the fullest conception of the Godhead cannot be the indeterminate feature of the absolute that's common to all traditions, but that it must have more specificity and more of a determinate nature in order to accept love. More that's what we teach, basically. But then to put that together with the details to be able to apply oneself in the worship, that would require to be fruitful in the full sense of the term, sadhusanga and the teaching and so forth. So does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. But I just would like to add something. Like I'm really struggling, when I'm listening to like why this question came up, because when you listen to people from different traditions, from different religions, everyone they have some attitude, like Padmanabha Swami mentions in his lectures, that like a child who says that his mother is the best, or his father is the best, like their religion is the best, and they understanding of God is the best, the deepest, the most specific, or whatever, the most, but I'm just thinking, the children usually they grow up, and when they grow up, they transcend that understanding, that my mother is the best. They understand that everyone's mother is the best, So I'm
Well,
thinking.
what they understand, I understand your question. What they understand is that every mother is best for every son and every
Yes.
daughter, but they still think my mother is the best. For me. So there's a subjective experience. My tradition is the best. If you did not think that, why would you accept it? You're going to analyze with your limited ability and depending upon your the kind of sangha that you have, what is the best religion, let's say, or best spiritual path? Everybody's going to look for the best one in their estimation. And then they choose one. And they wouldn't choose one that they didn't think was the best. And if they attain perfection in it, they'll think this is the best perfection. But they will also note that there are other perfections as well that have some common threads to them. They're ego effacing and transcendent in nature and so forth. But transcendent is variegated. So while we think that the devotees of Narayan, that's best, who love him in awe and reverence, that's best for them. And it really is. We teach that the nature of rasa is that each devotee feels that his is the best. Even if they step back from an objective perspective, away from their subjective experience, what we call tatastha vichar, or just objectively analyzing, they can say, well, that rasa, for example, does afford more intimacy. Okay. Still, I like I like my dasya rasa the best. So I think that the maturity that you talk about in your analogy of a child thinking my mother's the best, then realizing every mother is the best, it's not that he does away thinking that my mother is still the best. He just thinks he realizes other mothers are the best for their sons and their daughters. So there are many bests. Instead of saying my mother is the best and the only good one, everyone else is bad. That's the childish thing you want to get away from. So the difference between the two perspectives. Does that help? Okay. Bhagavan Shri Krishna Ki Jai.
I forgot to tell you that we have 8 questions. I know some of them can spill over into the next call, but I forgot to mention that to you.
A way of saying I should give shorter answers.
I guess I'm not saying that, but like maybe a little bit.
Suggestion.
So Padmanabha Swami, can you ask one of the questions from the Spanish speaking devotees?
Yes. So he's asking if sankirtana includes all those things. Well, there are different types of kirtan. That's one thing. There's Nam Kirtan, there's Lila Kirtan, Guna Kirtan, chanting about the Leelas of Krishna, about his qualities, his name, Nam Kirtan. The reciting the Puranas, the Bhagavatam is a form of kirtan. Also, Sukadeva performed that, and he became perfect by that. So different forms of kirtan. The sankirtan dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was central to his lila and the method to his madness, if you will, typically involved chanting Nam Kirtan aloud and in a group. However, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in some places, the chanting of Haridas Thakur on a japa-mala is also referred to as sankirtan. So there, while japa is considered to be an anga of dhyan or smaranam rather than kirtan, it's thought if you chant out loud, then it becomes an anga, sublitim of kirtan. So Krishnadas Kaviraj anyway refers to, we would say, the out loud chanting of Krishna Nam, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, on japa-beads on the part of Haridas Thakur as a form of sankirtan. But more typically, it refers to a group of devotees getting together, and there's the leader and the response. And this is the sankirtan that was manifest by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu take in the courtyard of Srivas, and then taken to the streets in a form of civil disobedience from a political and social point of view. Of course, as the means to the ideal that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embodied. Goloker Premodan Harinam Sankirtan. Now, that said, of course, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur coined the phrase Brihat Mridanga, and his idea was that the Sankirtan, as we're speaking about it in public, could go a short distance, but if you take and put it in a book and print it, that message can go around the world. So he extended the idea of kirtan to include publishing and distribution of literature. I don't think that's a classical kind of understanding of the term. And obviously, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wasn't publishing books, but the Goswamis were, of course. I think typically it would be, it would be looked at differently than sankirtan. But the idea that the essence of the kirtan, the teaching behind the kirtan, which we were speaking about earlier in relation to Taras's question, is well served by publishing and circulating literature about it. So I would say that classically speaking, sankirtan refers to chanting out loud and in an assembly. Sankirtan. Kirtan can be done singly out loud. That's also, but we wouldn't typically call it sankirtan. So I hope that helps. That I should mention, though, that said, that there may be circumstances in time and place in the world where performing sankirtan, which was so central to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time and his method of dissemination and in pursuing realization, despite that, it may be times and places where it doesn't serve our interest best. And other means for example, dissemination and even for our own progress may be more fruitful. So that, therefore, the need for a dynamic understanding of the conception is there. I'll give you an example. Many years ago in Bombay, where Prabhupada was establishing a temple, and he was establishing it with some difficulty. There was some resistance from the public, and the devotees would go out and sing kirtan in the public, but they were not being mocked by the public, and so Prabhupada told them to stop. That it wasn't serving its purpose. So sometimes there's this fanatical edge I've seen where you've got to do sankirtan, you've got to go out in public with 2 different color socks on and make some kirtan. Otherwise, you're not really doing what the Yuga Dharma is. So I wouldn't look at it in a fanatical way like that.
Chitta, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Morning, good morning. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I've been reading in the Purpanda Jivanamrita, and there's a verse in here where this is in the section on acceptance of the favorable, and Sri Vyasadeva says, if persons engaged in the devotional service of Lord Hari are unable to obtain food and shelter despite their attempts, or if their acquisitions are lost or destroyed, they should, without anxiety, absorb their hearts deeply in the thought of Lord Hari. And so that kind of got me thinking, because in the context of surrender, of course, we know that one should accept Krishna as one's protector and maintainer, and also we hear from the Gita that he will carry what we have, what we lack, and preserve what we have. So I'm just wondering what how does the sadhaka think of that verse? Like, why would that happen if one is trying to surrender to Krishna, and why would he allow that to happen?
And what was the thing that happened? You lost, the devotee lost something?
Lost their any acquisitions they had, things that they had acquired, or if they were unable to get food or shelter or whatever.
Right. Why would Bhagavan allow that to happen?
Right.
The ways of God are difficult to understand, but there's a nice statement, and you'll be familiar with it when I remind you of it, of the Bhagavatam, where Shiva asks, or I think maybe Raj Parikshit asks, why is it that the devotees of Shiva tend to be opulent in the devotee in terms of material possessions, and the devotees of Vishnu tend to be poor? And Prabhupada liked this verse very much. The answer was, of course, that when someone is very dear to Vishnu, he takes everything away from them, because he knows that they're Sharanagata, they're dependent upon him, they've embraced this. When I take everything away, they won't criticize me. They'll take shelter of me that much more. I have nothing. I thought I had this, I thought I had that I could rely on. I can't. I have to rely only on Krishna. So Prabhupada said everything was taken away from him. He was living like a beggar. I mean, he had a reasonable life. He had a family, he had a business, it was successful, and so on and so forth. And step by step, all those things were taken away from him. He was just living in Vrindavan as a beggar. He didn't even have enough money to print his published publications, the Back to God at the time. And so what did he do? He just took shelter of Krishna that much more. And that verse, he embraced. This is what's happening to me. Now, that's not how everybody's going to react, every devotee, when things are taken away from them. And it may not be that Krishna's taking it away, and it may not be that they're not that much absorbed in the spirit of Krishna's maintaining me, and so there's going to be a different reaction, a different result. We're all under the influence of karma to some extent, even devotees, although the karma may be rendered different than it would have been had one not been engaged in bhakti. But anyway, to your question, why would Bhagavan take things away? The answer is that when he's actually involved, he's the one that takes them away. I'm saying it's not, you can say in a broad sense, he's taking things away sometimes, but you may not be that surrendered. You may be just in the midst of your karma. You may be still plugged in to the fan of the karmic world going around, and that's why things were taken away. But I'm a devotee sometimes. but when Bhagavan actually takes things away, why would he do that? Because he loves you, and he knows that if I take this last thing away and I embarrass this devotee, even embarrass him in the public, what will he do? He'll take shelter of me that much more. He'll go the distance, the final step, and so forth. This is why Bhagavan does it. Otherwise, not necessarily him that's doing it, only in the broadest sense. Does that help?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Some people think, well, I took shelter of Krishna. Why did this happen to me? Well, let's look at what it means to take shelter of Krishna. Are you engaged only in angas of bhakti? And that's how they're outlined in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sutta. There's angas for the words, there's angas for the mind, there's angas for the body to perform. So the angas for engaging your mind and intellect, for engaging your words, engaging your actions. Not everybody's able to do that. That doesn't make it bad, but it means that there's more to surrender than knowing the verse and repeating it. All right. What else?
I was just going to say that the pastime of Bali Maharaj is such a great pastime to read to kind of really understand the point of Bhagavan taking away everything from his beloved devotee.
Jai. Bali Maharaj Mahat.
It seems like Sharda has a follow-up question in the chat. And she wrote, so does that mean that Krishna is testing us?
But by taking things away?
I mean, I'm guessing that that's what she means. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Krishna's actually taking it away. Yes. And he's, I don't know if testing is the right word, but giving us an opportunity to do the right thing and come closer to him. We may not, but typically I don't think he will directly take things away from somebody who wouldn't, as I was saying. Next question.
Padmanabha Swami, do you can you ask the other question from the Spanish-speaking devotees?
Yeah. The japa mala in chanting, japa? I'm not sure I understand what what you're getting at by the question, but you know, Archan is one anga of bhakti, and japa is of nam, anamala is another anga of bhakti. They're both connected because they're both bhakti, but they're separate angas. You may think of the deity while you chant nam on your beads. They're not you know disconnected, but they are distinct angas. And that's the best I can come up with, you know, based on your question. There may be more to your question than you're able to voice to give me more to think about and respond to. But that's my answer.
Okay. Omkar, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Jai Guru Maharaj.
Haribo.
My question is kind of been lingering a while as a non-question in my mind, so I don't really know how to ask it, but it's about Shabda Brahman. And the concept is pretty big. I think the Shabda Brahman is used even in the Gita in the 6th chapter. The 44th verse says Shabda Brahma Kivartate, which means to, would you translate it as recitation of ritualistic, the ritualistic recitation of the Vedas. So I'm wondering more in relations with how Guru imparts Shabda Brahman.
How what?
So, how Guru
Guru?
imparts Shabda Brahman. Yeah, like say you would be sharing with Krishna Leelas to us. Sorry, my mic's a bit off. So how would it be that the Shabda Brahman would function? Because I hear it being talked about it being unable to be given via tapes or via letters, but then there's also initiations via letters and tapes. And just curious what's the breadth of Shabda Brahman? That makes sense.
Well, I mean, the words together mean spiritual sound. Shabda Brahman. It could mean sounds coming from Brahman, which would mean the original Vedas. That would be a conservative type of a translation that not everybody could hear. The rishis could hear it, and then they wrote about it in the form of an Upanishad, something like that. And that writing about it in the form of an Upanishad was then identified maybe with that rishi's name, can be taken and recited by qualified persons, and that's considered Shabda Brahman. So we're extending the notion. But in a broad sense, it means spiritual sound. So when we receive the mantra from the Guru, we receive classes on the Bhagavad. In the broad sense, we consider it all Shabda Brahman. Spiritual sound. Now, obviously, as I give an example, it can be written down. The rishis are receiving something, and they're through sound that can't be heard by ordinary people, and then turning it into a text. So that to minimize the value of the text in the name of Shabda Brahman doesn't seem too wise when the way you learn about the text, the term is primarily from the text. So the Upanishads, yes, they're sounds, but the sounds can be recorded, and I think that it's also worth underscoring the intention behind the transmission. So once Prabhupada invited Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj to Navadvip to oversee the installation of the Anantasesh deity, which is went into the foundation of the temple that Prabhupada wanted to build there. So he wanted the blessing of Pujapad Sridhar Maharaj. Sridhar Maharaj came, and then they had lunch, and then Prabhupada asked Sridhar Maharaj, please take my bed and take rest. And so Sridhar Maharaj took a little rest after lunch, and Prabhupada went down and performed the ceremony. So later, Govinda Maharaj, Sridhar Maharaj's disciple, asked that you invited Guru Maharaj here to preside over the ceremony, but you had him rest in your bed and you presided over that. How am I to understand that? And Prabhupada replied, oh, because he gave consent, gave his will, it was all done. I just carried it out physically because his will was behind it. I carried it out physically. I didn't want to bother him with actually having to go through the task, but just that he came and gave his consent, his will to preside over and bless the event, it was done. So the will, the intention is important. So if a great personality intends through a written form or recorded form to convey a mantra, like I received the mantra Diksha from Prabhupada through a tape. Harinam, I received it directly from him. I received the mantra through a tape. It works, I can tell you. The mantra worked. So some people may criticize that. I think that there may be sadhus who criticize that, but I'm not here to fault them for that, rather to find a reason why they're saying what they say and what their intention is. They wouldn't disagree with what I'm saying. There may be circumstances where they are emphasizing, for example, let's say there's been since the passing of Prabhupada, there's been a fair amount of religious fanaticism about him and about his books. Like, all you have to do is read his books. That's all you have to do. And sometimes it's preached that all you have to do is read his books. Therefore, you don't need to associate with sadhus, especially if they're outside of our corporate, mission. Everything's in Prabhupada's books. That has been used as a weapon. Everything's in Prabhupada's books to deny people's interest and intimidate them from hearing from sadhus who may have more spiritual power than persons in the society that's being propagated. And so then that sadhu may come along and say, reading the books is not sufficient. Shabda Brahman must be heard directly from the sadhu. He may give an emphasis like that for that purpose, to counteract that. But he wouldn't disagree with what I'm saying either. And he's probably written books himself and thinks that reading them will be useful for the devotees. Studying the Gita is mentioned at the end of the Gita as Gyan Yagya. Those who study the Gita upside down, inside out, and backwards, from every direction, Krishna says that and share that with other devotees, they're very dear to me. So there it's being recommended. There's a place for that. So I hope that helps. Does it?
Yeah, Jai, it does. I was also wondering just about I don't know, we're probably out of time here. Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
No, go ahead. You better follow.
Yeah, just about hearing about Krishna Leelas, for instance. What's in that occasion, what would be the role of Shabda Brahman there?
That's Super Shabda Brahman. Mahashabda Brahman. Harikatha, hearing about Krishna. Let me give you an example, and we'll conclude with this. In the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami pens a verse, and I believe he attributes it to Mahaprabhu himself. He says, Shrotam api upanishadam dure harikatamritam. Shrotam means shabda. Means Shrotam means that which is heard. Shrotam Brahma Upanishadam, from the sounds of the Upanishads. Aham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, Neti Neti. This is Shabda Brahman, right? The sounds, the Vakyas, of principal Vakyas, sounds of the Veda, in the form of the Upanishad. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that, or Jiva Goswami says that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, those sounds coming, that Shabda Brahman, is Dure Harikatamrita, where you can arrive at within transcendence through those sounds is Dure, is very far from where you can arrive at by the sound of Harikata. And then he goes on to say in the second half of the verse, the result of such Harikata is for example, the manifesting of the Sattvika Bhavas, involuntary ecstasies, weeping, fainting, and so on and so forth in Bhakti Rasa. You can't get that by chanting Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, but by Harikata you can. So it is Mahaprabhu said, and Jiva Goswami said, he said, that Harikata, that is Maha Shabda Brahman, to be sure. Okay? I mean, Krishna is the Param Brahman. So sounds about him, that's Param Shabda Brahman. Is that all right?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
All right, so I think we have to, the other question, we have to save them for next week.
Sounds
There's
good.
one question. What is this one question? Tengo esta preguntas. I have some questions. ¿Qué significa tomar refugio de Nitai? What is the significance of taking refuge of Nitai? ¿Qué significa tomar refugio del maestro espiritual? What is the significance, as I understand, of taking refuge of the spiritual master? ¿Qué significa tomar refugio en sí? In the self. Okay, we'll save it for next week. Okay.
Thanks.
Gracias. Todos devotos. Todos mundos.
Alrighty. Haribo. Thank you so much, Gurudev, for answering the questions and being with us today.
Hari.
So for some of the devotees who got on, which it seems like around 12:30, daylight savings time happened. So the class started an hour earlier. It seems like everyone's dropping out though. So do you want to make some announcements, Archana?
Yeah,
With
just
the classes and stuff?
yeah, just to remind everybody that we have a new series of classes, which pretty much take every day of the week. You have the opportunity for Shrabda Brahman, be able to hear from saintly personalities and lots of variety. So I'm just going to run through the speakers and the classes so everyone can write it down and try to get on regularly to the classes. So on Mondays at 11:30 Eastern Daylight Savings Time, Paramatma Swami is giving his series on Vaishnava etiquette, continuing to do that. Wonderful classes. Tuesday, 11:30. These are going to be all Eastern Daylight.
Oh, yeah. Let me do that.